Hi, I'm Teresa Baglietto, host of In Shock Radio. Like many of you, I have faced my share of challenges. From cancer to job loss, divorce to financial hardship, you name it, I have experienced it. This podcast is about overcoming life's toughest moments and finding the courage and strength to keep going. So tune in to unleash your inner strength and discover how to move forward, no matter what life throws your way. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show and happy Monday. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, a dear friend of mine, Anne Marie, who I've known for over 30 years. We're going to have a heartfelt conversation about a significant loss she experienced and how she found strength and support during that very challenging time. Good morning, darling. How are you?
I am well.
I am so excited to have you on here as my very first guest. When I started planning this podcast and brainstorming about potential topics, I knew your story of strength and resilience was one that needed to be shared. I was just deeply moved by everything you had been through and how you navigated such a difficult time. In January of 2011, your husband, Alexander, went on an annual ski trip with his friends and you stayed home, right?
Yes.
You received a call on January 25th with some shocking news that he had been in a fatal ski accident. This must have been an incredibly difficult time for you. Can you describe some of the initial emotions and challenges that you faced after this call?
If we start off with emotionally, I had to learn to navigate between these two worlds that I simultaneously found myself in. I was in the physical world as we know it. And then from the other side, I had Alexander still communicating with me. So that was the first uh, emotional task that I needed to kind of get a handle on. In addition to that, we had two children. Gabe was 12 at the time. Gianna was 16. They were obviously devastated and, faced with their own challenges because Alexander was not only a great dad, he was a very hands-on dad, and he was a coach to a lot of Gabe's sports since Gabe really lost his hero. And Gianna lost her dad and had to deal with that at a college prep high school, and she was a junior that year. I had that on my plate as well. And then from a practical standpoint, I had to face the irony that I would be the one finishing this house, which was only 80% done. I had 4 rooms that were in studs. I had a detached garage, which had been his construction shop because he was a general contractor building our home. I had to empty the shop of all of the power tools that he had collected for 28 years. So I could demolish that old garage and then make room for a new one. And I had the front and the back landscape to redo. I mean, it was a lot. But I was grateful that Alexander and I had talked quite often about each other's wishes in the event of our death. I think we did that because we had lost a lot of people already in our married life. And we would discuss at great length what it would look like if I passed away first and what it would look like if he passed away, to the best of our ability. And we had put a living trust in place. And so why I was grateful for that is that I really knew what his wishes were. And man, when you know what your spouse's or your partner's wishes are, then you're sort of executing, right? You're not second guessing yourself. And then also because of this interesting experience I was having where I was able to tap into him on the other side, or he was more aptly tapping into me, I would be awoken 3 a.m. with song riffs that he really liked. And he was telling me in my head, these were thoughts that I did not put there. They were like implanted in my brain. He was telling me what songs he wanted to have included in the video montage that we were working on for his memorial. What I found interesting right from the start is that I had married a guy, Alexander, who he himself had lost his dad when he was 7. My mother-in-law was 31 with 4 kids under the age of 8. And I had seen the consequences of that loss in Alexander and in his 3 siblings, whom I met as adults, right? And I really felt in those early days that all that he had shared with me about his childhood without a dad, it's like it had provided me with a playbook of sorts. I had a knowingness about the experience from a child's point of view because of what he had gone through. I knew that grief counseling was going to be super important. And my mother-in-law at the time didn't really have access to, nor was it really talked about much back then. This is in the early 60s.
Right.
But I knew that I needed to get my children some support more so than what I could give them. And one night, again, 3 in the morning, I'm awoken and I have a very active child. Gabe is a little athlete. And so I just Googled the word grief and the word camp kind of at the same time, I think.
Right.
Well, up came this place, this resource that I recommend to anyone who finds themselves in a situation with children. It's a summer camp called Comfort Zone Camp. It is free, and it's where all the participants are children from the ages of 5 to 18, and you can't go to camp unless you have suffered a great loss. It's supported entirely by donations. All the grief counselors are there as volunteers. I mean, it's just amazing. Gabe went in there suicidal. He had a suicide plan that he had shared with me.
Wow.
And I called the director to say, hey, heads up, this is my son. And they were very grateful for the heads up. And again, this is not the first time this had happened. But once my son got there, he told me later, he understood he was not alone. I think that's the biggest thing that kids go through. They just feel like this is not happening to anybody else. My world has just exploded and I'm all right. He learned how to speak about how he was feeling. He heard other kids talk about how they were feeling. And so he comes out of that camp 4 days later telling me, Mama, I am not going to commit suicide. I just couldn't do that to you. Right?
That is absolutely incredible. Your heart must have been singing and you must have been crying at the same time.
All at the same time. This place was just magic. And it was started by a woman who was a child herself when she lost a parent and there were no resources for her. So I can't say enough about Comfort Zone Camp. And then once we got home, he also saw a local counselor weekly for a few months after that camp. My daughter, who was 16, she also went to grief counseling, but a bit begrudgingly. I've always had a good line of communication with our kids. So thankfully, they openly shared what they were feeling with me to the best of their abilities. And my daughter thought she could just talk to me. And I would say, okay, but I'm not properly trained. For me, their sharing, while it was hugely important, it was probably the most gut-wrenching aspect of this sad situation.
You're so fortunate that they were open with you and shared these deep, dark feelings with you. It's just an unbelievable lift, difficult with teenagers because they're very aware of what happened.
Yes. And because they were supported, that gave me some bandwidth to support myself.
Yeah.
I think if I had not had that playbook that I got sort of coincidentally by marrying Alexander, who had lost his dad when he was only 7, I might not have been as astute, but I really felt like I knew what I needed to do for them. And that enabled some time to free up to try to support myself.
What would you say were some of the things that helped keep you going when there was so much happening? You had 2 children, you were trying to guide and help get through their own emotions. You also had this unfinished home. Can you talk about the resources you leaned into?
Sure, there were many. So I'd say the first person I really leaned into at that time was my sister, Isabel. She left her 3 young kids who lived 4 hours away, and she came to live here with my kids while I was at the trauma hospital in Reno for 4 days because I was
Wow.
arranging Alexander's Oregon donations. We were both organ donors.
Uh-huh.
And Isabella and I have been able to talk about anything and everything. And she actively listened to the details of all this information that I was getting from the other side from Alexander. And she never once thought I was crazy. That was golden for me. I think another thing I did is acceptance. I accepted that on some level, his passing had to make sense, or else he would still be here. Um, one of the
Right.
relatives, one of the relatives who spoke at his funeral said, "I figured God just needed a master carpenter to help him complete a new wing on one of his heavenly castles." A- And Alexander is thrilled because he knows he has all of eternity to complete it.
Yes.
Yes, because at the time of his passing, we were at the 12-year mark of rebuilding our home. He took the house that we lived in on this lot for 9 years and he completely demolished it. It became a hole in the ground. And I was pregnant with Gabe and we had to move out, obviously, because I had no roof. We were fortunate to find a rental just a mile away and we rented for 9 years. And then it was like good enough for us to come in, like the kitchen was done and we had one bathroom. It was pretty bare bones. When he passed away, I still had 20% of stuff to finish and a new garage to build. I became a paper general contractor, like overnight. I really made it a point to talk about Alexander with the kids and with the others. I have known people who have lost people and like you can't say their name and it's very awkward. And that's not the case here in this house. We talk about him often and he's in every square centimeter of this house because he designed it and built it.
Uh-huh.
And his cremains are in a beautiful wooden urn that was turned on a lathe and it's sitting in the kitchen exactly as he had requested. When we had talked about this early on, the eventuality of one or the other dying, he wanted his cremains to be in a beer stein that he had collected from Germany. What he didn't realize is that there are a lot of cremains. I mean, it's a lot of content when someone goes through that process. I had, again, friends coming out of the woodwork asking how they could help, and I assigned the task of purchasing an urn for the cremains to one of our friends. And he came back with this beautiful urn that's all wood, turned on a lathe. I mean, exactly Alexander's aesthetic. And it's in the kitchen. We talk about him. He left us a lot of funny and a lot of loving memories, and we revisit those often. I also leveraged my mother-in-law in a way. She had succeeded with far fewer resources than I had, and she managed to raise four wonderful human beings. So that example also gave me courage. My parents were both 81 at the time, and they reassured me that they were there to help in any way. And I was their 51-year-old child, yet their offer was just so comforting, so comforting. And then I have a great circle of friends who are reliable and great colleagues and neighbors, and people feel helpless. They feel helpless. Alexander was loved in the community, and they would cross my threshold in tears. And if you give them something to do, if you have a task that you can assign to them, it makes them feel better because it gives them something to do.
I remember when I was recovering from all the different surgeries as a result of the major health issues that I went through, and people would ask how they could help. And sometimes I wasn't sure how they could help. And it was great when they just stepped up and took charge. People do feel helpless. They want to help, and some people need more direction than others.
Yeah, it's great to have friends who can proactively suggest or do. When I got back from Reno, I have a pretty large kitchen with a lot of countertops, and I couldn't see the countertops, Teresa. They were covered with food and cakes and cookies. People had come out of the woodwork, and Isabel is here, my sister, greeting them all. So we had food for days and a freezer stocked full of stuff. So I think that's the first thing that people kindly offer, right? Because who's got the energy to even think about going to the grocery store? But I think if you get quiet, right? If you just get quiet and you think seriously about, okay, what are the things in front of me and how can people help? I mean, I had a whole memorial to plan and it had to be a really special one because he was such a special guy. And I have the good fortune of having a great pod of friends from my high school. We plan our high school reunions together every 5 years. And so we have this cadence and this system, right? I lobbied them. They were my proxy and they got all the stuff done that I envisioned I wanted. And it was beautiful, exactly like it needed to be.
That's so incredible. It's really wonderful to have a village of friends supporting you and who helped you orchestrate all this.
Absolutely.
It would be really wonderful for everybody to hear the people that you connected with who have Alexander's organs and talk about the special bond that you made with one of them in particular.
When I was in the trauma hospital in Reno, I'm faced with a bazillion different forms, and there were many things and there were many boxes, but there was one box that I checked that asked if I wanted to be contacted by any of the recipients. I want to be clear that not everyone who's related to an organ donor needs to check that box. For some people, they don't want to know. I knew for me in that moment, I knew that if I could understand how his organs help somebody else, that would help me. I'm curious by nature, and I wanted to see right where this ended up. So I checked that box, and everything is anonymous. It remains confidential. I waited 2 years and I didn't receive any contact. What would normally happen is the recipient would be notified that I am willing to connect. And then the recipient would send me a letter through this middleman, if you will. And nothing was coming my way. So I contacted Donor Network West, the middleman, middle entity, and I wrote my own letter. And actually many letters to the 2 kidney people, the liver person, and I trusted that they would get those letters to the right people. And so that took time also. And ultimately, my letter reached a woman in Stockton who went into the hospital one day in Stockton thinking she just had a really bad flu and ended up being helevaced to San Francisco and put into an induced coma because her liver was failing. And no one could figure out why the liver was failing in Stockton.
Right.
But in San Francisco, they saw what was going on. It was really too late to do anything. And they actually called the family in one fine morning to say their goodbyes to her. They told the family, short of a transplant, this is not going to end well. And that afternoon, Alexander's liver became available. She wakes up from a coma in San Francisco. Hello, welcome back. You're in San Francisco and you have a new liver. A little shocking. In my letter, I explained who this guy was, right? Who this donor was, what he was about, what his passions were. I just really wanted the recipients to have an understanding of him as a man, as a person. And so when I ultimately met with her in person for lunch, she came with a friend of hers. His name is Jim. And Jim said, your letter was hugely helpful to us because I had noticed things in Tracy that were very different from before the transplant. I said, do you tell? He says, well, 6 months after her transplant, I go to her house and I find her gutting the hallway bathroom, like removing everything, the tile, the cabinets. I'm like, Tracy, have you ever done this before? And she goes, no, but I've always hated this tile. And I got a book from Home Depot and I'm just going to do it. And mind you, they had no letter from me yet, right? So he's watching her gut a bathroom and redo it. He's watching her exterior paint and interior paint, all things that she never did. And he's noticing that she really, really loves cilantro. So they get my letter and they're like, ruh-roh, this makes sense now.
I know why she's suddenly interested in remodeling her home.
Right. A single woman.
It's very miraculous.
And Jim is not a believer at all. Jim is quite the scientist. This really had him scratching his head.
I bet it did. Because how can you explain that? She had no interest in that before she received Alexander's liver. And all of a sudden, she's got this newfound skill, interest,
passion.
Yeah. Do you stay in touch with her?
I do. We get together for lunch a couple of times a year. She is such a responsible recipient. She cares for this liver with kid gloves. I gave her a picture of Alexander the first day I met her in person, and she tells me she keeps that by her bedside and she thanks him every day. And she sends me birthday cards. And in the birthday cards, she'll say, I got to go to my grandson's high school graduation, and I know I wouldn't have been able to do that without Alexander. And then the kid graduates from college or somebody has a baby. She's just so present and she's so appreciative. I didn't need to meet these recipients or have a relationship with them. I see it as a blessing. I mean, it sucks that my husband's not here. And yet I look at the blessing that these people have had in their lives and how appreciative they are. And one of the kidney guys, finally got married and had a baby because he just didn't want to marry his longtime girlfriend while he was still on dialysis. And, in his letter, he explains that they're now pregnant with a baby boy. And he asked me for permission to name his child Alexander. I mean, when you become a widow, everything changes. Everything from what you watch on TV to what you eat to the songs that you listen to. You realize how intertwined you are with your person when they're suddenly not here. It's more than just not having them in your bed to keep you warm. It's just everything changes.
Yeah.
I was very overwhelmed, understandably so at first. And I did a few things that I think helped me in my overwhelm so that gradually I did become confident. I'm a confident person by nature, and there are a lot of reasons for my confidence. This was such a brand new adventure, and I kind of looked at it that way. I did certain things to keep me grounded and help me through that overwhelm. And gradually then it's like, okay, I got this.
You and I are alike. Not everybody has a strong will or a strong spirit to push through when shit hits the fan, no matter what that is. I think that's what's drawn us to each other, being lifelong friends and watching each other go through a lot in our adult lives. It does take a stronger spirit to push through. There's choices we have in these moments. You've demonstrated you chose to make sure you and your children were taken care of through camp, counseling, talking openly to your kids, even though you yourself were absolutely devastated inside.
Yes. And I honored that devastation. I am all about feel the feelings. I'm a very optimistic person, you know that, but I don't think it's prudent when you are faced with something this shocking to just play the happy game. I think what's important is to allow yourself to feel the feelings. And that is what gets you through. So, for example, we had a deluge of sympathy cards here. And I would get the kids off to school and I would pick 10 sympathy cards, make my cup of coffee. And while I drank my cup of coffee, I allowed myself to feel, wail, and I would sob as I drank my coffee. And then I'd shower and I'd get dressed and maybe put on a little makeup and, I'd seize the day. I think that's just vitally important because the worst thing about a shock, right, is the feeling. And a feeling in and of itself is not going to kill you. So the more you can accept the fact that, yep, this stinks and feel what all of that is, I think the stronger you become to move forward.
Yeah.
I saw it as a growth opportunity.
I love that you honored yourself by reading those cards. It must have been incredibly difficult, bringing up a lot of sadness and tears. Many people would avoid that, choosing to avoid the pain of the emotions. But you gave yourself that important moment of reflection and processing, a moment of therapy.
I really sort of innately knew, okay, I need every synapse I have in my brain, banging on all cylinders here because I have so much to deal with. I didn't drink for 8 years. I did not touch a drop of alcohol for 8 years.
That's amazing.
Just I need to keep my wits about me. The other blessing that I do want to point out is my employer at the time, IBM, They were awesome. They granted me a 3-year leave of absence. Hello.
Wow.
I had the HR lady repeat that on the phone because I could not believe what I was hearing. My job was waiting for me. And what's really interesting is, so that was a 3-year leave of absence. And at the 2-year mark, by then the house was finished. Things were really buttoned up, nice. And my kids separately came to me and said, so when are you going to go back to work? Because they knew I was the sole provider before, and I am clearly the sole provider still. I was like, how is this working? I thought that was a good sign, but my goodness, the blessing of the time to be here, to be the paper general contractor, managing all the people that I had here to finish up.
The fact
I
that
did.
your employer offered that benefit to you, I can't imagine what it would have been like if you had the financial strain on your shoulders on top of everything else. It truly is a blessing and another sign of Alexander sending his spirit to you and everyone around you.
Well, it really was because I had never any intention of working for Big Blue. You know me, I was the startup person. So I never in a million years thought I'd be working there. But one of my more successful startups got acquired by said company. And that's why I ended up there. And for the first 6 months, I felt like, well, we all felt like we were banging our heads against a brick wall. And Alexander would look at me and say, but hun, it's a big company. You'll be able to find another role that makes more sense, given the new landscape. And, you can stick it out a year. He would tell me, you could stick it out a year. And I took that guidance because I had no home. He was rebuilding. I had, 2 kids in school that I was funding. I mean, the last thing I needed to do was to go and try to find a different job because that's a whole cycle in of itself. And I stayed at IBM for 10 years, in total 15 years. But when this happened, I was almost near my 10-year mark. And HR sang my praises about all the great stuff I had done, which is why they offered me the 3-year leave of absence, but it still just felt surreal to hear that. It made every difference in the world. They gave me a toll-free number for my children to call a therapist if the children talk to. Yeah,
Yeah. What would you say to others who are facing this loss?
I have a lot to say. I do talk to widows on a pretty regular basis, and I just level set with new widows, right? There's the 5 stages of grief that was put forth by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. There's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. She's got this framework that's supposed to help us learn to live with our loss. And I get why that idea of these, stages, it feels really comforting because when you're in the middle of this grief, the thought that there's a roadmap and like a clear path with an end point, I mean, that can feel like a lifeline. But in my experience, grief doesn't work like that at all. It is not linear. It doesn't follow rules. It definitely doesn't fit neatly into 5 or 7 little boxes.
Right.
And so I tell them there's no right way to grieve, my friend. Grief is messy. And how you grieve is as unique as your relationship with your person. I saw that with my family of 3. And I think what really gets them to have their eyes widened is I explain that grief is not something that diminishes over time. It remains constant. It's like a weight that we carry. And so over time, when you're engaged with and you're being present with your grief and you're going through those feelings, I look at that like lifting that weight daily. Then you build this emotional strength. You build the muscle that you need to carry it. Also, a fabulous life coach by the name of Krista with a K, Saint Germain. I don't know her personally. I've never met with her, but I stumbled upon her and she offers free podcasts that are called the Widowed Mom Podcast. I know she has a community on Facebook. And she got into this because when she was 40, her husband suddenly died in front of her, unfortunately, changing a tire on the side of the road. He died in 2016, right? And my husband had died in 2011. So it would have been great to have some of these resources that she has put forth. I can't say enough about her work. In listening to her podcast, even this far down the road, they serve to give me terminology for what I experienced. Like early on, I was saying how it stretched me. So there's this thing called post-traumatic growth. That's a
Okay.
thing. I definitely felt that. I didn't have those words. I knew I had expanded. I am just a much bigger and a much more, I'd even say, capable person because of this experience. And then the other thing is, I tell widows, we touched on this earlier, not to be shy about asking for help or accepting help, being open to help. I think it's important to move every day. I mean, I had a little doggy that I still walk every day, and we do 5 miles a day, and doesn't matter what the weather is, and that's really important to get out and move. Um, I told you I managed my alcohol, and I don't eat processed foods. I think I'm just trying to stay as clean and healthy as possible to give my body a chance to deal with it, because I think that that's important. And we just honor Alexander. We honor him. We feel joy. We laugh. It doesn't mean you're going to miss your person any less. Living proof that you can have grief and joy. They can coexist.
That's great to hear. I loved the different resources you leaned into taking care of your body, because we can abuse ourselves when life isn't going our way. It's amazing to hear how well you took care of yourself. You just held it up so well.
Yeah, every day. And yeah, I mean, the grief bombs, they still come and happen and to catch you by
Wow.
surprise. But you can't have those feelings living inside you. That's also poison to your body. I mean, you just can't. And
Right.
so the only way out is through feeling all of this and allowing yourself to feel the feelings. And like I said, it's not going to kill you and it's unpleasant, but you get to the other side and you're stronger for it.
It's another life lesson.
It is. And I thank you for the compliment. But, I think back to when you're on the airplane and they talk about if the air masks are going to pop down, the parent or the adult is supposed to put the mask on first and then the children. And that's what I was. It's like, as my daughter aptly stated, you are the last parent standing. I needed to figure it out for me and for them. When I got back from Reno, I said, look, I've never done this before, but I'm confident that together we will figure it out.
Do you think knowing you're the only parent for your kids, that also plays into how well you take care of yourself?
I've always taken good care of myself. That's just sort of been, I was an athlete all through, school, through college. But that's just sort of my makeup. I'm 100% Basque. We are people of the earth. We eat real food. And I was blessed to have parents with a fabulous vegetable garden in the backyard. They couldn't speak English, but they made a mean soup. And that's always been a part of me. And what I did learn as I got older is how poisoned in many ways the food supply in the United States of America is, and how you have to be all the more vigilant as someone doesn't know what to do with that. And when you're going through a period of stress, your immune system is taxed. I don't care how well you are compartmentalizing this in your brain and even doing some of the things that I was doing, the body keeps score. So
Yes.
I try to help my body every way I can.
Are there any traditions or ways that you and your kids celebrate Alexander's memory?
We celebrate, as I said, kind of throughout the year. We think about him often, but like on his birthday, I'll put a special little bow on top of his urn that sits in the kitchen. We'll light a candle. He left us with an interesting thing. My son and I both see this often. So Alexander was also an athlete, and he loved to wear the number 33. When Gabe became an athlete and Alexander became a coach, Alexander worked it such that Gabe often had the number 33. So Alexander passes away, and Gabe and I see the number 33 in the most random of places, but it's like in our face. So we think of him then because he's letting us know, he's around.
Yes, all the time.
You feel them around you at that time. Unless you've lived it, it's like, okay, maybe. But once you've lived it, it's just undeniable. They are trying to get your attention to let you know, hey, one quick example is the summer after Alexander passed away, Gabe was graduating 8th grade. He had a lot of guy friends and families who were going to Hawaii. I literally invited myself and Gabe to go with these couples who I knew. I've been with them since kindergarten. I said, hey, I'd like to take Gabe sort of out of the house. And they loved the idea. And I did proactively invite myself. We get to the airport on Oahu, and a bazillion different buses are coming in for different hotels, lots of activity. It's humid. You can hear the birds, and we're waiting on a bus, and our bus is 33.
Oh my God, no way.
Way
There
out
it is again. There's that sign.
out of dozens. And he just points to the bus and looks at me, and we're like, hi, hun.
There you are. Thanks for sharing your story. I think it's a very powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of the human spirit and how important it is to support each other through difficult times. You had resources from friends, family, a lot of food,
Lasagna.
lots of yummy lasagna. That sounds delish. Not everybody has large villages, and they have to find their people that can be there for them through the entire journey, however long it takes to get through. You've got to have your wall of people.
And that's why I think a group like what Krista St. Germain has is really instrumental. That is the village. And again, I didn't find her until way later because she wasn't even doing this when Alexander died. But this group of women who just share openly and provide each other a tremendous amount of support.
Some good resources here. Thanks again, Anne Marie. This was incredible. You are such a resilient and strong woman.
Teresa, thank you for the compliment, but you are calling the kettle black.
That's why we're such good friends, my dear. I hope everyone enjoyed hearing Anne Marie's journey. She highly recommends the 3 resources she spoke about throughout the interview. I'm going to share them here. The first is Comfort Zone Camp. This is a free grief camp for children. Their website is comfortzonecamp, all one word, .org. Krista St. Germain from the Widowed Mom podcast, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's The 5 Stages of Grief. Thanks everyone for joining. Until next time.